Yep.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Agriscot and the NFU Scottish Government Seminar. I'm also delighted to welcome today's speakers. For the first time, our First Minister, John Swinney, MSP. For the first time, we have had a First Minister here at Agriscot. The Minister for Agriculture and Connectivity, Jim Fairley, MSP, at the far end. And our NFU Scotland President, Martin Kennedy. And I look forward to what promises to be another interesting debate covering many of the biggest issues facing the industry today. But first, a quick item of housekeeping. This is always a tremendously popular seminar, and wow, standing room only. Thank you for all attending. We have a capacity audience, and once again, but for any reasons that we need to evacuate the seminar room building, would you please follow the steward's instructions to the nearest exit? Thank you. Before we start with the seminar, I also want to mention that you can gain CPD, BASIS and NAROSA points by attending this seminar and also by attending every other seminar throughout the day. So if you please go and speak to the organisers, they've got the lists, put your details in there and sign the documentation. Diane Burnside, where are you? Please put your hand up, make yourself known. Diane, have you got the register for? Right. Diane's your point of contact for this seminar. Diane, thank you. More information about the full range of CPD points are available by attending these seminars at Agriscot, and various seminars demonstrations available in the event catalogue or at the Agriscot website. And before we start the seminar, I would just like to say one last thing. Martin Kennedy, you've been here for 4 years along with me, and this is the last time you will be sitting up here in your present position. I will look forward to your next position that you probably take up after you hand up the reins. On behalf of the Agriscot team and myself, I would just like to thank you, Martin, and give you this small thank you token on behalf of us all here. I think it's very apt that Martin's enthusiasm and passion for the industry, his glass is always overflowing. So Martin, please keep that glass full.
Keep it full.
Yeah. And myself, I've been here for 7 years standing in this position, and sadly this is my last day standing hosting this seminar. But I will leave you in the capable hands of my very good Vice Chair, Gilmer Laurie. Gilmer, please raise your hand and just let yourself known. So next year, Gilmer, thank you. So on with the main event. Martin Kennedy, our NFU President, is going to take the podium first of all. So Martin, the floor is yours.
As ever, I need to put the mics down slightly. Everybody's getting used to that now. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, First Minister, Minister, ladies and gentlemen. Robert, can I once again start by saying congratulations to you and your team for organising such a great event here at Agriscot. This is continuing to grow and is increasingly diverse in its appeal to the wider industry. It goes without saying, with this year being your last year in the chair, you're leaving pretty big boots to fill. I think you've done a tremendous effort with the team for a long time, but I am under no illusion that the drive that there is with Gilmer and the team behind it will keep this event going from strength to strength. I'd also like to thank the whole team in facilitating such a large turnout at this seminar today, particularly in the presence of both the First Minister and the Minister for Agriculture. One thing this event always highlights is the importance of the agricultural industry to the Scottish economy and the people within it, who not only drive that economy, but also deliver for our environment and support our rural communities. Sadly, given the direction of travel made clear by this new Labour government at the budget on the 30th of October, they have shown a real lack of understanding of how the agricultural industry operates. Not only have they pulled the rug from under our feet by imposing impossible tax burdens on family farms, something they said they would not do, they have also completely washed their hands of an over 50-year-old ring-fenced budget safety net put in place to support food security. Given Labour's welcome strapline that food security is national security, it's now very hard to understand their thinking. More importantly, it's very easy to understand they know nothing at all about what farmers and crofters deliver for the whole of society. So where does that leave us now? Well, from a funding perspective, that ball is now firmly and exclusively within the gift of Scottish Government. First Minister, first of all, can I also thank you for attending this event today. I know the fact you responded positively to our request highlights how seriously you take the industry, and I hope that means you will do all you can to enable us to play our part. Now, as you know, you've been my MSP for many years, and during that time we've had many meetings covering many various topics, particularly in the early years when I was the LFA committee chair. In fact, I'm sure every time you saw my name crop up, you thought, good grief, what's he wanting now? Or words to that effect, maybe, I'm not sure. I have to say, you usually understood the need for continuing support to drive our economy, which enabled us to look after the environment that's the envy of many across the world. That understanding was always appreciated. And again, when we met on my farm this July, you reiterated your predecessor's commitment around direct support, with at least 70% of rural support being targeted at Tier 1 and Tier 2 of the new tiered structure, which was also welcome. However, things have moved on. The world is now a very different place for many different reasons, and the stakes are now much higher, with many more things in the mix than just funding. Issues around taxation, as I said earlier, difficulties with the Home Office regulation that, for example, is stifling our ability to harvest the soft fruit and veg, a major part of our economy, less effective plant protection products, which is making it harder for us to be efficient and reduce our emissions, mind-blowing regulation around river management that never ever respects the advice given from the people on the ground who have generations of experience, a food price which is the lowest in Europe and the third lowest across the globe relative to income, a labelling system that's flawed and allows our consumers to be hoodwinked on many occasions, a public procurement system that at the moment is certainly not leading by example, a programme of reintroducing species that continually bites the hands that feed us, and on top of all of this, the threat of another national park that the vast majority of local people simply do not want. All of the above have been imposed on farming and crofting by government decisions that as yet do not understand the unintended consequences. Yet we are still continually asked to do more and more on a budget that has only half the buying power it had 10 years ago. So that brings me back to funding. Regardless of the UK government washing its hands of a ring-fenced fund, the fact is, whatever funding now goes towards agriculture is 100% within the power of Scottish Government. Both the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs in the Islands are on record saying agriculture now needs an uplift in funding, both stating that will obviously be dependent on an uplift in funding from the UK Government. That significant uplift is now there, with an uplift of £1.5 billion in the current financial year, followed by another £3.4 billion for the 25-26 financial year. This is now a record settlement from the UK Government and must be reflected in a significant uplift in the agricultural budget, with, of course, a clear timeline on the promised return of the remaining £46 million. The 4th of December is a fantastic opportunity for the Scottish Government to now show, in spite of the UK Government's decisions, that they are willing to support the agricultural sector in Scotland, which is the catalyst to our £16 billion food and drink industry. I also know it would send a strong signal to the industry if within that block grant you implement that 5-year multi-annual ring-fenced fund. Agriculture is a long-term business and requires long-term certainty if we are to continue to not only produce food, but take care of the environment to the degree which we've become accustomed to. which then also drives our fantastic tourism industry. This is the very reason NFU Scotland will be holding a rally outside Holyrood on the 28th of this month to demonstrate all the positives the whole industry delivers. Moving on from funding into actions the Scottish Government can make that will not cost money, but will in fact save money. We as an industry are willing to play our part, as others must, to address climate change and help enhance our environment. That policy is currently being devised with the future Tier 1 element now almost finalised till 2028 and Tier 2 from 2026 onwards currently getting worked on. However, these progressive policies cannot be achieved with our hands tied behind our backs. Last year, we saw devastating floods exacerbated by poor river management and beaver damage that cost not only the government over £1.5 million, but farmers many millions of pounds more. We also continue to see more and more farms impacted by sea eagles that now threaten the very rural communities we're trying to protect. And on top of that, we see other predators such as badgers creating havoc on other species. Every time this is brought up, the answer that is given is this is a very sensitive subject to talk about. I'm afraid my interpretation of that answer is, if I make the correct decisions here, I might not get elected the next time. Well, the time for worrying about being re-elected is not now. Now is the time to make these correct decisions, or the sensitive subjects that we will be talking about in the future will be. Why is it we have nobody living and working in our rural communities? Why is it we see more and more wildfires each year? Why is it all our good productive land is now waterlogged? Why is it we now have to have imports when we can, more expensive ones that are substandard, especially when it comes to fruit and veg and other foods? And why is it our economy and the environment which we have loved for so long has now been destroyed? Re-election then will be a distant fantasy. It is imperative that we listen to the experience as well as the expertise in science. Scotland can lead the way, but only with trust in the industry. We now have a world-leading opportunity at our fingertips that only needs the nod and a date from this government to implement UHF ultra-high frequency bovine EID. The industry has been crying out for bovine EID for over 20 years, and we now need to embrace this leading technology to not only save time and money, but also improve our health and safety record, our efficiency and our animal health and welfare. All we need is a date. And I would suggest the 1st of January 2026 for all calves to be ultra-high frequency electronically tagged to lead the world. Another initiative driven by government, which has certainly been welcomed by the industry, is the Good Food Nation Act and plan. Yet so far, it's not delivering. Why is it, when it comes to public procurement, we put price above quality and provenance? As an example, we still cannot get Scottish chicken in Scottish schools. A few more pence on every chicken would create the demand to fill that supply. We cannot go on treating food like it has no value. Priorities must change to realise good food locally sourced is good for your health and the environment. This must, and I have asked for this before, be part of the school curriculum. If food, climate and biodiversity is top of everyone's agenda, then why are we not talking about it in our schools? It's little wonder we have such a disconnect about where our food comes from. Excuse me. That brings me on to labelling. NFU Scotland recently enrolled the Diffley Partnership, a professional polling company, to survey 1,700 people on many things to do with food labelling. One clear outcome of the poll was the desire to have much clearer labelling in products as to where the product originated from. This has given us a clear mandate to push further on this initiative, as it is very much in the public's interest. Watch this space on that one. So back to the Scottish Government and clearly lay out what our asks are. First Minister, you know I am an eternal optimist, and I always try and sell the massive positives of all this industry does for Scotland. It may seem that over the last 10 minutes or so I've been unusually gloomy about all the things we're currently up against. Well, the fact is, we are up against it right now, but you have the power to change that. Although some of our issues are reserved to Westminster, you can still show your support. Firstly, given the debate that's happening in the Scottish Parliament today, I welcome your support in our opposition to the current APR and BPR proposals from the UK Government. If this goes through as currently planned, it will lead to the break-up of family farms and result in much higher food inflation. NFU Scotland will be attending the mass lobby in London on the 19th, where we will be meeting numerous MPs, and I would ask you personally to raise this issue with the Prime Minister. Secondly, on the reserved issue around labelling, support our push for much clearer labelling on country of origin. This must be UK-wide and include the food service sector. And to be more specific for Scotland, with the new policy changes coming into play next year, within the Tier 1 structure, you have asked us to do 2 from 5 in 25. This is to have carried out 2 of the 5 options available by the 15th of May 2025. I'm taking this opportunity to ask you in return to deliver 6 from 6 by 26. This would not only enable us to deliver many of your desired outcomes, it would also allow farmers and crofters to thrive in an environment where they're respected for all they deliver. These 6 asks are: firstly, on funding. Now, this is entirely within your control. Commit on the 4th of December to an increased ring-fenced multi-annual fund, and clearly set out that you will return the full 46 million borrowed from our portfolio within the next year. Secondly, listen to the people on the land when it comes to river management, and allow us to play our part to alleviate the problems of increased sediment build-up leading to more extensive flooding. This is routine maintenance that can be done at no cost to the government, which increases our resilience and adaptation to climate change. Thirdly, take seriously the issues around species management and commit to proper management where required to protect not only our ability to produce food, but also to protect other species and allow rural communities to thrive. Without action in this soon, we will see an even faster rural depopulation than is currently the case. Highlighting issues such as this in the context of food production is exactly why all these topics should be discussed as part of the school curriculum. That then makes the messaging around these decisions much easier as the bigger picture is fully understood. Fourthly, take the opportunity now and give the industry a date to implement UHF bovine EID. The Scottish industry is ready. This will showcase the beef sector in Scotland as being truly world leading. Fifthly, lead by example with public procurement and support locally sourced food at every opportunity. There is no point in having a Good Food Nation Act or plan if we don't practice what we preach. And finally, listen to the people who live and work in the area where a new national park is proposed. It is absolutely clear there is an overwhelming majority that simply do not want this imposed upon them. So please, just ditch this proposal, save money and allow this extremely productive area to continue to thrive. First Minister, I am always optimistic about this industry, and my enthusiasm will never fail on it. Decisions we make today are not only critical for today's farmers and crofters, they are even more important to safeguard the future of our next generation. We will play our part, and if you play yours by delivering on these 6 asks, then I know collectively we will deliver for Scotland, and your chances of winning back the rural vote and staying in power will increase significantly. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Well done. I'd just like to hand over to First Minister, Mr. John Swinney.
Thank you very much, Robert. And you'll not be surprised to hear that I'm standing in front of you just now thinking, well, where on earth to start after that long list of priorities from Martin? But I'll start in the proper place, which is to thank you, Robert, for your leadership of Agriscot. As you said earlier on, this is the first time I've been to this event. I'm delighted to be the First Minister to come to this event, and I can see readily the significance of this as a gathering place of the agricultural sector, but also a place where much business can be done to support and enhance the development of Scottish agriculture. So thank you very much for your leadership in developing and strengthening this event over the years, and my good wishes to Gilmore in the leadership that he takes forward as well. It's wonderful to be with you today, and it's a platform, a welcome opportunity for me to express my warmest thanks to Martin Kennedy for his leadership of the National Farmers Union. I intend to be at the National Farmers Union conference in the spring. I think it's in February, is it? At which Martin will stand down, so I'll have an opportunity then to to reflect on his leadership. But from my perspective, it's been a real pleasure working with Martin over many years as his Member of Parliament for the last 27 years, but then also to see at first hand the leadership that he's been able to deliver to farming in Scotland. And I've greatly valued the advice and the counsel that Martin has given to me over the years, and the deep understanding of the questions that are before us today. And I'll talk a little bit more about those today. And before I move on from talking about presidents of the National Farmers Union, it's an absolute delight to see John Cameron of Balboothie here. So it's a previous serving President of the National Farmers Union, and John, it's absolutely a delight to see you here today, and I hope I can catch a word with you before I leave this morning. As Martin said, and as I've commented, I have been a Member of Parliament representing Perthshire for 27 years, and in those 27 years I have learnt at first hand and listened carefully to the challenges and the issues that face the farming industry in my community, and then tried to reflect that in the priorities that I've taken forward, either as a Member of Parliament in arguing for the case for farming, or alternatively to take those decisions supportively within government over the years in which I've had the privilege to serve in government. So when I spoke to the QMS gathering, the breakfast gathering here at the Highlands Show in June, I made a point which I hope was of reassurance to the industry, that when I walked in the doors of Bute House, 27 years experience of representing farming communities walked in with me, and influences and is part of the decision making that I take forward. Now, that will not mean that I can do everything that you would want me to do, and I'll reflect a little bit on the 6 asks that I've just had put to me by Martin in a moment. But I do give you the assurance that I recognise the significance and the importance of a sustainable future for agriculture in Scotland, because so much of it depends upon so much of the future of Scotland and the way in which we steward our land and we utilise our land depends on there being a sustainable future for farming within Scotland. And that approach underpins the approach taken forward by me as First Minister, but also by my Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs, Mary Goujon, and the Minister for Agriculture, Jim Fairley, who's with me today, and it shapes the way in which we take forward the priorities of the Scottish Government in relation to farming. So what I want to do at the outset of my comments is to make clear to you the significance I attach to the work of the farming industry within Scotland. You are significant players in delivering economic growth. You're the foundations of some of our greatest export success stories, and you're the key custodians of one of our most precious assets as a country, our land. And that has to be reflected in the approach that is taken forward in public policy, and it will be the approach that's taken forward in the priorities of my government. Now, I'm going to come on to talk in a moment about the implications of the autumn budget that Martin referred to. But I want to set the role of Scottish agriculture within the wider priorities of my government. In September, I set out the programme for government to the Scottish Parliament, and at the heart of that is my commitment to work to eradicate child poverty and to raise living standards by growing the Scottish economy. I want to grow the Scottish economy while we take action to protect the planet through our action on climate change. And I want to do all of that to improve our vital public services. So when you hear me talking about the work to eradicate child poverty as the focal point of the government's agenda, I don't want you to think of that as some compartmentalised policy commitment. It's at the heart of growing our economy, of ensuring that we generate the wealth in our society to support the public services that will enable us to eradicate child poverty and to take the measures necessary to invest to support climate action within our society, an action that is absolutely essential given the challenges that we face. So agriculture has an essential role to play in realising those priorities, particularly when it comes to producing high-quality food sustainably, to growing our economy and to protecting our planet. Agriculture is, after all, at the heart of the rural economy. You operate businesses that contribute to one of our most successful sectors, food and drink, and we must cherish and nurture that in the years that lie ahead. But I also acknowledge that the challenges facing the industry are incredibly significant at this particular moment. We face a twin nature and climate crisis. The 2023 State of Nature Scotland report found that monitored species have declined on average by 15% over the last 30 years. Last year, a study by the James Hutton Institute found that Scotland's climate is changing faster than anticipated. And you know better than me what that means from working on the front line of mitigating and adapting to climate change on your land. Martin made reference to some of the challenges that we faced in my own locality, and I met with Martin at the side of a field at Dowley in Perthshire last October, just over a year past October, where a field where the River Tay had not burst its banks and had flooded at any moment earlier in recorded history before December, that was full of crop, that was just about to be harvested, was flooded, the crop was completely destroyed by the flooding of the River Tay in an exceptional weather event on the 7th of October 2023. One illustration of the breaching of our expectations about the effect of the climate that was illustrated in my own community, which had a huge cost for the farmers that were involved in producing that crop. So I use that to illustrate the fact that there are issues that we have to confront, which are not just about the farming industry, they're about wider issues in public policy, where we have to take the action to recognise the effect of climate change in our society and to address those. But those are not the only pressures and uncertainties that you face. You face uncertainties arising from inflation and higher energy prices. I've been stunned by the effect on livelihoods in the farming sector, by the spike in energy prices following the invasion of Ukraine that has, of unimaginable proportions, which make the viability of farming enterprises significantly challenging. And all of these contribute to the very real strain on farmers and producers, which is why it's important you hear from me, and you'll also hear it from Jim Fairley regularly, of the appreciation that we have for the excellent work undertaken by Rasabi in providing practical, emotional and financial support to people working within Scottish agriculture, which is deeply valued at this time. Now, recently, I've been reflecting on many of these challenges which have an effect on our economy, the effect of inflation, higher energy prices, the pressures on cost of living, the challenges of actually being able to support economic activity in our society. And I've reflected in recent weeks that the last few years, the combination of COVID, the effect of inflation, energy prices, and all that's gone with it, has had the feeling of being a bit of a long, dark winter. After nearly 2 decades of economic volatility, there is one thing that we know: the climate and the economy are not going to remedy themselves. So therefore, what I appeal today for is a spirit of working together between government and the industry to prepare the ground for what I hope is a spring that can emerge from this difficult and challenging dark winter. And there is so much strength within the agriculture sector in Scotland upon which we can build. The winners of the Scottish Agriculture Awards, organised in partnership with Agriscot, demonstrate the wealth of excellence and innovation that farmers and food producers in Scotland offer our nation and the world. You play a huge role in preserving traditional practices in tune with nature, like crofting and organic farming, while leading the way in forging new ones, using technology and innovation to improve your productivity and profitability. And so much of what the government tries to do through the support that we take forward for institutions like the James Hutton Institute and Morden is about working with you in creating the new technologies and the advances that can be commercialised to enhance and strengthen the economic prospects and opportunities of the farming industry. But I do recognise the significant uncertainties that you face up to, and I now want to reflect on those in relation to the challenges arising out of the United Kingdom budget in the autumn. Funding certainty and market stability for farmers is absolutely crucial in the period that lies ahead. And I want to do all that I can to try to ensure that that is the case in Scotland. But the implications of the UK budget are very significant for the agricultural industry and very significant for the Scottish Government into the bargain. Funding for agriculture and marine activity in Scotland, which was previously ring-fenced, has now been baselined into the Scottish block of funding. This means that the full amount allocated for 24-25, £620 million for agriculture and £14 million for marine, is to be included in the block grant. Now, one of the comments Martin made was that this meant that all of this funding was now firmly and exclusively in Scottish Government hands. And to an extent, that point is correct. But what has to be recognised is that the Scottish block grant is significantly affected by decisions that are taken by the United Kingdom Government. So the overall size of the Scottish block grant is a product of changes in public expenditure undertaken by the United Kingdom Government. And that is now going to have an effect on the size of the resources available to the Scottish Government, which includes that funding which was previously ring-fenced for agricultural support. So if there is a decline, for example, in the support available for agricultural support in England, that will have a damaging effect and a negative effect on the Scottish block grant as a consequence of the application of the Barnett formula from the United Kingdom governments. Everybody thinks the Barnett formula is a thing that generates, in all circumstances, increases in public expenditure. If a budget is reduced in England, where there is 100% comparability factors in Scotland, the Scottish budget will go down as a consequence. So there are significant uncertainties that arise as a consequence of the decision that has been taken by the UK government. And while I, of course, welcome that funding allocations will be a Scottish government decision, unfortunately, it's clear this announcement comes with some very big catches that I've set out. Instead of long-term funding certainty that was available during our EU membership, we now have an inadequate settlement within the United Kingdom. The announcement made by the UK government on the 30th of October was for 1 year only. So however much I would like to deliver a multi-annual settlement, we only have financial information for one financial year. And given the point I've just made about the uncertainty about the implications on our budget, that will constrain the ability of the Scottish Government to set out the multi-annual certainty that everyone in the industry would like us to do, because we have no line of sight on any composition of our budget beyond the 31st of March 2026 at this particular stage. In the spring, there will be a UK spending review which will give us, we think, 3 years of funding certainty, and obviously we will provide as much certainty as we possibly can do in ensuring that the industry knows where it stands. In addition to those points, the UK government must provide clarity on the future of financial support for the sector after confirming in the autumn budget the agricultural funding will be baseline, because we are not yet certain what will be the direction of travel on agricultural support in England, and those challenges could have significant implications for Scotland. So as we take forward the work and the dialogue in relation to the budget, I assure all of you, National Farmers Union, especially, of the willingness of the Scottish Government to engage about the contents of the Scottish Government budget and to ensure that the issues and the concerns of the agricultural sector are strongly reflected in the budget that we bring forward. I also make clear to you that the £46 million that the Government has utilised for short-term purposes to ensure that we could deal with the effects of inflation in other areas of the budget will be returned to this portfolio for use in the agriculture sector. And I give you that cast-iron commitment on behalf of the Scottish Government. Now, one of the other issues that emerged from the UK government's budget was the changes to remove exemptions of agricultural property relief for inheritance tax. And I know that this is already having a chilling effect on many businesses within the farming sector in Scotland. And the UK government must urgently commit to undertake and publish impact assessments of its budget proposals on farmers and crofters in Scotland. Fundamentally, my government would want to see a tax system that supports rather than hinders orderly succession planning and the transfer of land to the next generation of custodians. We are disappointed that the Chancellor chose not to work with the Scottish Government before acting on this sensitive matter. This arbitrary decision has led to intolerable levels of stress, worry and uncertainty for you all, which clearly could have been avoided. And the implications of these changes are very significant for the orderly succession planning within the industry. And what I pledged today, we'll have a debate in Parliament on this subject this afternoon, which has been called by the Conservatives, and the government will take an approach which will be to work constructively to revise these proposals, because these proposals cannot be allowed to stand because of the damaging effect they will have on the ability of there to be an orderly approach to succession planning within family farms within Scotland. This has been ill thought through and it needs to be reconsidered. So the implications of the United Kingdom budget do not give us the freedom to act on our own behalf. There are significant and negative implications, and we must work in dialogue with the UK government to address some of those questions. There are, of course, some specific decisions that we can take in Scotland. The 2024 payment strategy is on track, with basic payments and greening payments having started in September as planned. Over 16,000 businesses have received over £377 million to date, and we're providing as much certainty and confidence as we can. And the Scottish Government will certainly be focused on delivering the 4 priorities that I set out of eradicating child poverty, growing the economy, protecting the planet and supporting our public services. And of course, right at the heart of that lies the important contribution that agriculture can make in that respect. Now, Martin, in his speech, set out 6 questions for us to wrestle with. On the first question about funding, I've set out the challenges we have about line of sight in the future and the cast iron commitment about the return of the £46 million to support the industry. I hope I've demonstrated to you my willingness and my commitment, secondly, to listen to people who work on the land. I've done it for 27 years and I intend to do it in the future. On species management, thirdly, we will of course engage constructively with the farming sector on these questions, and there are points of statute that have to be followed in all of these processes. But again, we want to have a pragmatic approach to engagement on these questions. On the bovine EID issue, if Martin will forgive me, I'll take that away, or I might defer it to Jim Fairley for him to talk about. On public procurement, I think there is, many of these decisions are influenced by public policy choices at local level that I get a row for interfering in. But I do endorse the sentiment that Martin expresses, that if we've got the highest quality produce in our country, well, in the world, why on earth is it not on the plates of our school children in our schools? It's pretty straightforward to me. So I'll evangelise about that on your behalf where I possibly can do. And lastly, on the national park question in Galloway, I know this is sensitive. I know there's different opinions about it. I suppose that's the point I can best say. There's different opinions, and the government is consulting upon that, and we'll come to conclusions once we've heard all of the impact, the contribution from everyone around the country. What I hope, as we look forward, is that despite all the challenges that we face, and across, we're having a conversation here in the agriculture sector, across every sector of public policy, there are enormous challenges that we face in a very uncertain and volatile world. What I assure you about today is that I cherish and value the role of Scottish agriculture. I acknowledge its significance and its centrality in the stewardship and the management of land in our country, in the generation of high-quality produce upon which some of the significant taxation strengths of the United Kingdom are based, not least the whisky industry, and we must take steps to ensure that we secure the future of Scottish agriculture, and that will be uppermost in my mind as First Minister as I work with my ministers to deliver the best future I can for Scotland and for Scottish agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, First Minister. A lot of information there for all of us to digest. I'm going to open the floor up to questions. I want the younger generation, the next generation, to put their hands up and put their head above the parapet, because they are the future, and this is why we're all here. But before we do that, I'm going to First Minister, you passed the buck to Minister Fairley. Could you answer the question on EID first of all, please?
Yeah, and thank you very much for carefully swerving that over to me, First Minister. As far as the bovine EID is concerned, I made an announcement at the conference earlier this year that it would absolutely be the Scottish Government's preference that we go down the UHF EID system. I've had extensive conversations with Martin. I was at actually Robert's farm earlier in the year, seeing the practical use of it. There are complications with it because we're still part of the UK, so there are potentially UK Internal Market Act issues, but we are working through them. There is going to be a stakeholder group meeting early, sometime in December, but my hope is that we are going to get to the position where we will be able to deliver UHF, but we need to get through some of the difficulties that come from the UK and the EU position where we are at the moment. But it would very much be our preferred choice that we go down the EID route and the UHF EID route.
Thank you. Ali, could you, roaming mic, say who you are and where you're from, please?
Yeah, hi there, it's Ali Brunton, National Chairman of SAYFC, the Scottish Young Farmers. We've been working collectively with NFU's Next Generation Committee, and we've pulled together the main priorities and concerns from our collective membership. The three main concerns we've found are access to finance and investment, access to land, and the third one being upskilling and learning, with Martin highlighting the lack of agriculture within the school curriculum. What will your government be doing to ensure the future of the next generation within agriculture, which currently is incredibly uncertain? Thank you.
First Minister.
Thanks, Ali. I think the first 2 points of access to finance and investment and access to land are somewhat interrelated. They're not identical, but they're connected. And I think what I'm certainly very open to discussing is how we can find deliverable ways of assisting in undertaking, in supporting access to finance and investment, which would enable, theoretically, or remove one of the practical obstacles to access to land as a consequence. There is, of course, a relationship to some of the issues I was talking about inheritance tax, about how that can be reconciled. Now, if I look at other areas of public policy, government enables access to finance and investment through the Scottish National Investment Bank, where we're investing in sustainable business propositions. So there isn't anything that's inherently impossible to do here. I think when we've looked in the past and deployed schemes in the past about trying to support people aspiring to engage in agriculture, so I'm very open to how we might do that. On the question of upskilling and learning, obviously we invest in rural education through Scotland's Rural College, and in certain parts of the country There is the opportunities for land-based educational opportunities to be taken forward. I'm very keen to respond to demand where that exists. These courses are, Land Trust done a lot of good work on rolling out many of these schemes in the past and working with individual schools in that respect. And there's nothing in the Scottish educational curriculum that's an impediment to doing exactly what you're talking about creating the opportunities for young people to meet their needs. Indeed, the curricular approach is designed to ensure that we can reflect in different parts of the country different aspirations about curricular development. So I'm very happy to encourage some dialogue between the young farmers and education ministers about that to see how we can take forward the practical steps. And obviously the investment routes are routes that are open for us to devise as to how we might take that forward.
Martin, have you got a quick?
Yeah, just very briefly, Ali, I think your question is absolutely spot on. Access to funding is absolutely crucial, and following up on around the investment bank would be great to see. And also, I think when it comes to access to land, it's really important, particularly around the land reform bill we have right now, that we don't frighten landowners off the confidence of having to let land. We have to be very, very careful when it comes to land reform. That's one of the things that is absolutely key to allowing the confidence for landowners to let land on more of a long-term basis. It's vital we don't make decisions. On access to land, one of the key, and I raised this at the conference with Minister Fairley earlier on, a fantastic opportunity with the likes of Glenprosen, which is now firmly in your hands, but we don't see any advancement of what's happening at Glenprosen, but the opportunity for starter farms. I know they weren't 100% before, but just because they weren't 100% doesn't mean we can't look at it again and devise a system that gets people on the ladder. Because let's not kick them off if they've not got anywhere else to go. The reality is we've got businesses out there that have set up a family business on a starter farm, and if they're continuing with where they are, leave them alone. But if they have access to going on to the next stage, which is where the flaw in the system is, then that's when they have to move. But let's look at that again and have a firm commitment to looking at that. It's so important we have access to land for the next generation.
Quick points?
Yeah. Ali, I just point you to the fact that Henry Graham's sitting in the room, Ian Davison's sitting in the room. One of my asks in the programme for government was that the First Minister would allow us to put in that the government looks at publicly owned land and how those relationships can be built. The vehicle to that is phone. It's Henry is sitting in the room. You two make yourselves known to each other. We are absolutely committed to making sure that the next generation are getting the opportunities. There are areas around funding. There's the next generation practical training fund. We're hoping to reinstate that. It's out for procurement. I get that it's frustrating that it's taken a long time. There's the potential for funding at later dates as other funding streams become available. But the most important thing, I remember what it was like when I was trying to get into farming. Getting access to land is an absolute nightmare. And if Henry had been there and Ian Davison had been there, I'd have gotten into a farm a hell of a lot quicker than I did. So please make use of that resource. It's there in order to make sure that the next generation get the opportunities that many of us were denied.
Thank you. The young lady here had her hand up. Yeah. Is it microphone?
Oh. My question's something that I'm actually quite disappointed wasn't included in Martin's 6 objectives, and it's to do with the right to roam, and it's to do with how we are under attack in Scotland from people and their dogs and pets. There's been a huge increase in the number of dogs since the right to roam was initially put in place. I think touching 20% increase in dog ownership, and that a huge amount of that has come from COVID. And we're having constant attacks on livestock in fields because the right to roam says that the dog must be under control. Now, what is under control? That can be under control in 1 second and not under control another, and then we're losing livestock to it. Personally, we've lost a lot of livestock, and to be honest, I wouldn't even know the count of it because on hill ground, we can't see that every single day. We've tried to educate the public. We've tried through so many different campaigns to make people understand that dogs must be on leads, but they will not listen. And I think the law needs to be changed. The dogs must be on leads where there is livestock present. Whether or not it could be something that we have zones. So you have zones. So if you go to the beach, your dog can be off the lead. If you go to the woodland areas, your dog can be off the lead. But where there is livestock present, they must be on the lead, full stop, because we're just losing too many animals.
Martin to answer.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. Apologies for it not being in my speech, but there's probably another 50 or 60 things I could have put in there as well. I just tried to highlight some of the key elements. And also a little bit of clarification. We do not have a right to roam in Scotland.
Exactly.
We have a right to responsible access, which is two completely different things. And I get frustrated when we're down south as well, speaking to Westminster and the government down there that say we don't want a Scottish situation where we have a right to roam. We do not have that. We have a right to responsible access, end of. And that's what's written out in the access code. And there's been a push to change that and get the recognition for it. That's the push that should happen. There is legislation in place. It's a private member's bill that's taken through, I think, by Emma Harper, that actually influenced the direction of travel in this. So there is up to a £40,000 fine now or a jail sentence if this goes out of control. And that should be implemented, but we're not probably acting on it strong enough. So looking at that and reviewing it, it's how the terminology of responsible access. Your key point, and this is one that Cammy Wilson puts this across so well, is about if you're near livestock at all, then it should be on a lead, end of. And that's where we should be trying to get that in the access code.
There actually isn't much I want to add to what Martin said, because he's made the 2 points I was going to make. We have a right of responsible access. There is no part of the world that you could think in a definition of a right to responsible access a dog should be free to attack livestock. You'd never pass that. It's just ridiculous. So there is an issue about education around about that, so that people understand the obligations that they are on when they are taking access. But that is what a right of responsible access means. And secondly, there are criminal penalties that Emma Harper's legislation put into law, which went into law just last year.
Last year, yeah. It's now got royal assent.
It's got royal assent now. So there are penalties to enable that to be the case. I do accept that there is a need for there to be education measures around right of responsible access, and we'll take that issue away.
Keith.
First Minister and
Microphones. Just.
Thank you. Keith Dawson, Pickups for Peace and Scottish Farmer. First of all, thanks to the First Minister and Martin for their thoughtful and wide-ranging talks. But firstly, a thanks to the union and its members. As I speak, Pickups for Peace, a charity set up by Scottish farmers, is delivering its 500th vehicle full of aid to Ukraine. An incredible testament to the generosity of the industry. And I'd just like to thank the union for its support and all the members for their support too. It's obviously having major impact on all of us, this war. But it's a rare good news story in farming, and it shows what the industry can achieve if it works together. I'd just like to ask the First Minister, in the light of the recent budget, why would an entrepreneur invest in food security and farming? And we already have an age crisis in farming. Why would a young farmer return to their family farm to face a tax bill they couldn't hope to pay out of income?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Keith, can I thank you for the leadership that you've given to Pickups for Peace. There have been so many steps taken by people in Scotland to support people in peril in Ukraine. Pickups for Peace is a shining example of that, so thank you for your leadership there. And I know when I met the Ukrainian ambassador when I was in London a few weeks ago, and he was deeply grateful for the continued solidarity, not just at governmental level and the financial support at governmental level, but the welcome activity that's been undertaken when refugees have come here and the support that has gone to Ukraine. And again, in my own constituency, Maurice Leslie and Kenny Simpson have led the efforts locally to dispatch huge volumes of aid to Ukraine. I accept your point about, why would a young person come into farming with the inheritance tax liabilities that you can't hope to pay? That's why I think this is so ill thought out. I can't disagree with anything you said. I just think it's ill thought out. I think it doesn't understand the difference between asset rich and cash poor. It just doesn't understand that, and that's why there needs to be. We'll have to try to take. We've got a more constructive relationship with the incoming government. It's a more respectful relationship. So these are issues that we will take forward to try to get a change to what's been proposed here, because what is proposed is profoundly damaging, and we need to remedy that.
Charlie, next question.
Thank you, Robert. Firstly, with reference to the remarks the First Minister made about flooding and climate change, I'd like to point out that he didn't mention, if my memory is correct, that the flooding there was caused by damage to well-established flood banks by beavers. So would you agree with me that there is no point in us taking all of these climate change actions in one area if we studiously ignore other factors which completely undermine the efforts that we're making? Secondly, a brief point, which is my understanding is that the current Scottish budget is based on the 17% of the UK cap allocation. My understanding, if I'm correct, is that the Barnett formula delivers approximately 11% based on population and other factors of the UK budget. Should we be worried in the light of those figures? Thank you.
Jim, I'll come to you on the river flooding.
Yeah, as far as the river flooding side of things are concerned, Charlotte, what I can tell you is I announced that there was going to be a wildlife management forum at the Highland Shoe earlier this year. What I can tell you is that we will be having our first meeting. Myself and Alistair Allen will be chairing that meeting, and it'll be every 6 months to look at wildlife management in all its forms. Martin mentioned sea eagles earlier on. So we need to have a grown-up conversation about what that means. So we'll be instigating our first meeting on the 11th of December of this year so that we can start that process. We're taking it very seriously.
First Minister, you want to answer the next part?
I fear I may have to get us all in a darkened room and to discuss the detail I'm about to discuss about the Barnett formula, but let me try to make this as straightforward as I can. The £620 million represents 17% of the essentially the historic, the inherited share of agricultural support in the United Kingdom, which reflects topography and land challenges and issues within Scotland. Now, there's a consensus of opinion that says that that's not even adequate as it was, but that's what's been transferred. When it comes to, so that's now in the Scottish Block Grant. That overall block grant, which will be affected by changes in public expenditure in England, which will be influenced by the Barnett formula, which is a kind of, it's actually nearer to, I think it's nearer to about 9% than 11. So, if, for example, the whatever increase DEFRA gets, assuming there's 100% comparability with the Scottish Block Grant, which I think is the case, we're not absolutely certain it's 100, but it's close to 100. There would be, Scotland would get about 9% of that increase. So, in short, a larger amount or larger share of our budget will be influenced by a smaller degree of increase because of the relative size of that proportion of our block grant. And then, of course, other factors will come in. You know, there are negative Barnett consequentials. So, for example, if a budget gets, this is what's, in all those lovely big numbers that Martin talked about, they take into account negative factors that arise as to negative changes in English public expenditure that have an effect on our block grant. So in short, your last point was, should we be worried? I'm always worried about these issues because I think they can have, as you found out on the point that we've just discussed about inheritance tax, a lot of unintended consequences.
Martin?
Yeah, in terms of worried about the negative numbers. I suppose my concern is it is a positive number regardless of which way we look at it, whether it's £1.5 billion this year or 3.4 next year. The focus, the remit within Scottish Government is still up to you 100% what you do with that, regardless of the Barnetisation formula. Is that correct? Because at the minute, it's still within your remit to allocate.
Absolutely, Martin. But my point is, there is now there are a whole range of other factors that government has to wrestle with in that mix. A whole range of other factors about, and you've said it in your own commentary: health, education, local government, housing, transport, you name it. And what essentially has been done is, we've moved from a situation which we had in EU membership of 7-year multi-annual budgets of certainty. I've been a government minister for 16 of the last 17 years. I have never had more than 3 years line of sight on anything. Never more on the kind of funding we're now talking about here. So yes, in the past on EU funding with 7 years line of sight, I've never had more than 3 years line of sight on one current year plus 2 more. So that's a real problem in relation to your legitimate ask about multi-annual funding, because what I don't know, let me give you an example. Government's under a lot of pressure just now about reductions in capital investment in housing. Why has that happened? It happened because one budget line that the government was using to invest in housing infrastructure in Scotland was cut in one moment by 63% by the UK government. So suddenly we've got a funding stream that we think this is great. We can use this for years to support housing investment in Scotland, and suddenly it went down by 63%. And that was applied immediately. So that's why these are the funding uncertainties that come from being dependent on what can be at times arbitrary decisions from the United Kingdom government. We just talked about the arbitrary decision on inheritance tax. Nobody saw that coming. Out of a clear blue sky, it descends and it causes havoc. So I want to be as helpful and as pragmatic as I possibly can be, but there are some really big vulnerabilities and uncertainties that we have to wrestle with.
Right, we're running tight on time. One last question here from Farmstrong, I think.
Hi, Alex Ritchie, Farmstrong, Scotland. If the land is one of the most precious assets, then surely the custodians that manage it are even more valuable. I just wonder how the government can support initiatives like Farmstrong that aim to improve the mental, social and physical well-being of these custodians to ensure that they can continue to manage change and thrive.
First Minister.
Well, I think we can work very directly with you, and I think if my memory serves me right, you came to my aid with some suntan lotion during the Royal Highland Show when I had come out inadvertently without, and you'll realise why suntan lotion matters to people like me. So thank you very much for looking after me so kindly. But I think that what I hope I've conveyed is that I've got an understanding of the anxiety and the worry that you face, and people need to have places of support. We need to be open about these questions. We need to be open about airing the fact that these are difficult times and people face difficult challenges, and the support has got to be there to assist people. And if there is some direct collaboration the government can put in place to enable you to exercise your work, we can do that. I'm always struck, that there's I think almost a sense that people turn to government to solve all the issues that people face. And in my experience, there are often very, very good organisations that are more effective than government in providing that support. And we've got to find the ways to partner to make sure other organisations, not in government, can actually make an impact on people's lives. And I'm very conscious that Farmstrong does exactly that.
Can I add one more point here?
Quick.
Yeah. I'm going to add, Alec, I hope Carol McLaren's here as well. We have spoken extensively about mental health issues, the problems that arises, I have done a couple of debates about male suicide in the Parliament, but the question you asked about what the government can do is one thing, but it's every single one of you in this room are part of that. Every single conversation, every single friend that you've got, every single time you know when somebody's not right, it's up to each and every one of us to take part in that conversation. And by all means tap into to Alex and to Carol and find out what is the right way to do this, because there are right ways to do this, and they're the guys that know exactly how to do it, but it's each and every one of us have got a role to play in that. It's not just the government.
Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately we have run out of time for this session. To sum up, 6 from 6 by 26. Martin, I think that will grow arms and legs. I'm really pleased to hear 46 million is going to be returned to agriculture. We've had some really good questions. I didn't want any statements, but I am going to have a little pop at a statement here. 46 million, please get that money as quickly and as simply as you can into the bank accounts of working farmers. Keep it simple. We don't want to spend it on third-party companies applying for this funding for us. If that money hits the bank accounts of working farmers, you will have a sustainable Scotland. It will filter down every single road in Scotland. And a £1 investment from the government, £7.40 we will spend and invest in our country, and we will have a fantastic country going forward for all of us to be proud of. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. There was lots more questions coming, but as I said, we've run out of time. We are an hour ahead of schedule. Last year, you were here at 11 till 12. This year, 10 to 11. You've now got more time to go and spend money on the trade stands. Make my job, Gilmore's job, easier next year to sell these trade stands. So go and enjoy yourself. The beef demonstration will start at 11:30 in the main ring. Have a fantastic day. Great to see you all here. Thank you very much. And a big thank you to our First Minister, Jim Fairley, and our President of the National Farmers Union. Could you all just join in me and give them a voty thank? Well.
Mm-hmm.